Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Church at RV Online. Thanks for tuning in from wherever you may be watching today. And happy Mother's Day. To all our moms, the church thanks you today for everything you do to put the well-being of your children and your families above your own. You are amazing. You are raising families and leading careers, and we want you to know how truly appreciated you are. In a few minutes, we'll be joining the Worship Center live for a message from Pastor Jared in our series, How to Reopen Your Life. But before we do, let's worship and celebrate Mom together.
Mom loves this one in the car. Hey kids, let's play the quiet game. She loves this game because she always wins.
I'm always watching you because I have eyes in the back of my head. Mommy, that scares me.
In the car, my mom will say, "You know I'm not running a taxi service. I don't even know what a taxi is."
My mom says this a lot. You'll understand once you get older. So can you explain why my teenage brother doesn't know anything?
When Mom says, "Do you really think that is a good idea?" I thought it was until you asked.
When Mom say maybe, they mean probably not. We'll see means never.
My mom always says this one. I'm going to give you to the count of 3.
I don't know if you can count beyond 3.
Well, happy Mother's Day. I love you, Mom.
Happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day. We love you.
Love you, Mommy.
Love you, Mommy.
Even more than Brady.
Even more than James.
Walking the west side, lost on a lonely road. I was chasing the highlight, trying to satisfy my soul. All the lies I believed in left me crying like the rain. Then I saw lightning from heaven, and I've never been the same. Oh, I'm gonna climb a mountain, I'm gonna shout about it. I am a child of love. I found a world of freedom, I found a friend in Jesus. I am a child of love. Just when I thought it was over, you broke me out of the grave. Oh, I'm gonna climb the mountain, I'm gonna shout about it. I am a child of love. I found a world of freedom, I found a friend in Jesus. I am a child of love, yeah. Nothing can change the way you love me. Nothing can change the way I belong to you. Yes, I do. Nothing can separate. Nothing can change the way you love me. Nothing can change the way I belong to you. Yes, I do. Nothing can say child of love. I found a world of freedom. I am a child of love. I'm gonna climb a mountain. I'm gonna shout about it. I am a child of love. I found a world of freedom. I found a friend in Jesus. I am a child of love. Yeah. Oh, I am a child of love. Yeah. Oh, I am a child of love.
Hello, everyone. Thanks again for joining us online. We're so grateful that you have decided to spend some time with us today. Pastor Jared will be taking the stage in the worship center in just a moment. But before he does, I'd like to celebrate what's happening here at the church and invite you to take the next step with us. Yesterday, we had an amazing serve day here at the church and around the city. This might have been my favorite Good Neighbor Day yet because we were able to support and encourage hundreds of low-income military families, and we expressed our gratitude for the sacrifices they've made for our freedom. I'd like to remind you that on May 13th, we'll be hosting another worship night right here at the church. This time we'll be back indoors in our worship center. Garden Music will be leading worship, and pastors will be guiding us through a time of prayer and communion. Come sing with us. Connect with the Holy Spirit on May 13th. Worship night is at 6 p.m. and free childcare will be available. Please RSVP online. And finally, a reminder that we are back to meeting indoors here at the church on Sundays. When you're ready, we'd love to see you back at the church for in-person worship service. Join us next Sunday at 8:30 or 10 a.m. The Church at RV would like to thank each of you who give generously as we meet the physical and spiritual needs of our community. Your financial gifts allow this church to carry out its mission in a powerful way, in your home, at the church, and all throughout the city. Giving financially is also a personal act of worship that deepens our trust in our relationship with God. If you're in a position to give, we'd like to invite you to trust God with the resources to grow that relationship. Please visit crb.gives to give today. We're going to continue with worship now before we join Pastor Jared in the worship center for the third installment of How to Reopen Your Life. Enjoy.
Thou my best star, by day or by night, waking or sleeping, thy presence my life. Riches I heed not, treasure. And oh God, be my everything, be my delight, be Jesus, my glory, my soul satisfied. Oh God, be my everything, be my delight. Be Jesus, my glory, my soul satisfied. High King of heaven, my victory won. May I reach heaven's joy, oh bright heaven's sun. Heart of my own heart, whatever befall, still be my vision, O ruler of all.
Hey, 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 10 o'clock. How we doing? Awesome. Happy Mother's Day, moms. I hope you're being celebrated. Yeah, one cheer for moms. There's guys in here right now, you didn't even know it was Mother's Day, and you're terrible. And I hope you're celebrated well today, moms, because you're worth celebrating. I want to take this moment to apologize to my mom for all those Mother's Day where I complained and said, when is it Kids Day? You remember saying that as a kid? I was a jerk. I'm sorry, Mom. And happy Mother's Day. We're so honored that we get to celebrate with you today here at the church at RB, whether you're joining us online or whether you're joining us in person in the live studio audience. So we're thrilled that you're here. Yeah, a few for the live studio audience. Let's hear it, yeah. Okay, cut. We'll do the real thing now, all right? Have you ever had that experience? This happens a lot in the Hurd household, where you go to the beach, whether Del Mar, La Jolla Shores, and you get in the water and you're having a great time, and especially happens probably with your kids, where an hour, 2 hours goes by and you've been in the water and you got in the beach in Del Mar, but you get out and you're disoriented and you're in Santa Monica. You know what I'm talking about? Where you go into the water and you're thinking, we're going to have a great time. And something slowly, steadily over the course of the hour, the 2 hours, you have drifted without even realizing it. And you get out of the water, you're like, whoa, where am I? It does not look like where I got in. And in our house, in the Hurd house, we go to the beach a lot. And when we go to the beach, and my kids, they don't care. It could be 42 degrees in the Pacific, and they're still going in the water. And what we have to do is sometimes I'll take rocks, and my kids collect rocks when we go to the beach, and then they put they do a garage sale and they sell the rocks. Which, if you buy rocks for my kids, man, you got issues. Just go to the beach and don't tell them I said that. They're not in here right now, but they walked in one day. They'd sold some rocks. They drew some markers on them, and they came in, and I was like, surely they didn't make any money. And they're like, we got $24 today from selling rocks. I'm like, really? Honey, we're moving. Our neighbors, I don't know what's going on. Anyway, but we take some rocks and we set them down, or sometimes I'll do this with beach chairs, and I'll say to my three boys, Dane, Hayden, Ezra, 9, 7, and 4, guys, I want you to pay attention to the rocks or the beach chairs, because this is going to tell you where you came into the water And over time, and they've learned this over time, that you're going to slowly, steadily drift in a direction that when you get out, you're going to go, where's mom? I'm only 9. I'm not prepared for this scenario. And you need to pay attention to the rocks. And so we set these down as a way to mark a spot to sort of have as a frame of reference to get back to. And I say that because it's quite possible over the last 13 months that in your life, you have slowly, steadily drifted into some patterns or behaviors that you go, whoa, how did I get here? And as you emerge from the water of COVID, as you emerge from the funk of COVID, I think the goal of these days and of this series is that we be setting some rocks down in our lives to say, who do we want to be? How are we going to purpose in our heart to live our lives on purpose and to know who we are and to know where we're going in life? And we're not coming out of the water of the last 13 months going, I'm disoriented. Maybe for you, it's financially that you drifted into some patterns or some habits, some ways of spending money over the last 13 months just to sort of keep your sanity. You bought things, and that sort of has continued, and it started because you were lonely, and so you just kept ordering packages just so you can say hey to the Amazon guy every day. And now, 13 months later, you're like, whoa, I need to set some rocks down because I'm coming out of the COVID water, and I need to get some of the rust off of me. Maybe it's relationally. You insulated, you isolated, and you feel that distance socially still where you're coming out of the water a little bit, and there's relationships where you've been cut off, or there's people that you've cut out of your life, maybe for whatever reason, and you feel more isolated and lonely than you've ever felt, and you're coming out of the water, and you're going, I don't know if I want to be this kind of person. How do I reconnect relationally to others? And I think there's a natural slow and steady drift that happens in Babylon. We've said that over the course of this series, that you and I are raising kids. We're living our lives in Babylon, a society that does not reflect our values, and we have to live our life on purpose, because if we don't, we will slowly drift in a direction that we don't want to go. In fact, the writer of Hebrews said it this way. I love this. He says, we must pay the most careful attention. Hebrews chapter 2, verse 1. We must pay the most careful attention to what we have heard so that we do not drift away. We must pay the most careful attention so that we do not drift away. In fact, why don't we just say those words, pay attention, on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Pay attention to the rock piles. And we got to set some rock piles down in our life to say, this is who I want to be. If you're just joining us, we're in a series called Reopen Your Life, How to Reopen Your Life, and we're looking at the story out of the book of Daniel. This is about 2,600 years ago, 600 years before Jesus walked this earth, and it's the exile story, one of the major stories that takes up a lot of real estate in the Old Testament, where the people of God have been captured by the Babylonians. And we looked at Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the last couple of weeks. Today, I want to do a prequel to that. We're going to go to chapter 1 and look at this guy named Daniel, who wrote the book. And Daniel is well along in his years. He's older when he's writing this book, but he's reflecting on his teenage years and what's happened to him in his journey, and how he's kept the faith, and how he, in the face of the teeth of the Babylonians, was able to set rocks down from day one. And no matter what came at him, he was able to hold strong and firm and who he was and who God called him to be. If you have a Bible, you can turn with me to Daniel chapter 1. If you don't have a Bible, that's okay. You can follow along on the screens. That's a great place to follow along as well. We're going to start in Daniel 1. We're going to be in verse 3. And if you, just a little catch up on this series, the Babylonians would capture people from various nations, and their philosophy was subjugation through assimilation. They would bring the best of the best from wherever they'd conquered to Babylon, and they would brainwash them, and they would teach them the Epic of Gilgamesh. They would teach them about their gods and goddesses. They would teach them their Chaldean language. They had a system in place to make sure that all the Jerusalem or wherever they conquered you from was going to get off of you, and Babylon was going to get on you and in you. And this is what's happening for Daniel. And these are teenage kids, Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, and they get captured, and now it was the take the best, leave the rest philosophy. Here they are in Babylon looking around going, what in the world? This is the freak parade in Babylon, and here we are. Verse 3 of Daniel 1. Then the king ordered Ashpenaz, chief of his court officials. So Ashpenaz's job is, I'm the guy who's going to do the brainwashing of these Israelite teenagers, to bring into the king's service some of the Israelites from the royal family and the nobility. So you catch that. It's at the very start of the story. These kids conquered from Babylon, these Hebrew teenagers. They're kings' sons and daughters. They're nobles is who they are. And here they are. They were elites in their homeland, but now they're just prisoners in Babylon. In verse 4, it says, they were young men without any physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well-informed, quick to understand, and qualified to serve in the king's palace. And Ashpenaz, his job was to teach them the language and the literature of the Babylonians. You probably learned some of that along the way in school. Chaldean, Epic of Gilgamesh, Marduk, who gets slayed, and the whole world's built on his tail. Fun Mother's Day reading in case you're looking for something. The Epic of Gilgamesh. The king assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table, and they were trained for 3 years. And after that, they were to enter into the king's service. And I love this. It says, among those who were chosen from Judah, or the northern kingdom of Israel, were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And they may sound unfamiliar to you, but they're actually very familiar because we looked at their story last week. They were just renamed. The chief official gave them new names. To Daniel, he said, you're not Daniel anymore. Your new name is Belshazzar. To Hananiah, you are Shadrach. To Mishael, you are Meshach. And to Azariah, you are Abednego. And it says, verse 8, but Daniel, he's been renamed. Now he's Belshazzar, has resolved. And a lot of translations there will read purposed in his heart. And I love that. If you have a KJV or New American Standard, it'll say purposed in his heart. Daniel purposed in his heart not to defile himself with the royal food and wine. And he asked the chief official, Ashpenaz, for permission not to defile himself in this way. And so I love this. A couple things happen at the very start of their Babylonian journey. The first is they come into the king's quarters and they're given new names. And we kind of read that and go, well, okay, they called him Belshazzar, they called him Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. In fact, that's kind of how we refer to the story. But these names were not just sort of passive, here's your new Babylonian name, you were Tony, now you're Tiger, I don't know. They're not like the just standard Babylonian names. The new names are actually a slap in the face to their Hebrew heritage. And the name Daniel, that name means God is my judge. If your name's Dan here, or Danny, you didn't know that, congratulations, God is your judge. God is my judge is what the name Daniel means, and especially in Hebrew, this is still true today. When somebody gets a name, that it means something, and there's some heritage attached to that. Well, for the Hebrew people, the name Daniel, popular name, but it meant God is my judge. And the name Belshazzar, the name they gave him, was a name, and it kind of loses. You kind of get lost in the translation from Chaldean to Hebrew to Greek to the English, but it means Bel is my commander, and Bel was one of the Babylonian gods. And so when they said that, they were telling him, a big slap into the face, look, Daniel, I know you come from a place where you believe Yahweh, God is your judge, but I'm telling you in Babylon, that's not true anymore. Bel is your commander. And somehow, and that was true for Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, these new names were all ways of being subversive to their Hebrew heritage. And they were a slap in their face. And they said, look, call us what you want. But I love Daniel. He says, I'm putting some rocks down. And I've purposed in my heart. And I decided before I ever got to the shores of Babylon who I'm going to be. And that God is my judge, and I'm going to honor my God. And so call me what you want. Call me Belshazzar. Call me Shadrach. I don't really care. I know who I am. I've set some rocks down. And the same thing that was true for them has got to be true of you, and it's got to be true of me. That we don't just get into the water of Babylon or the waters of American culture and go, well, we'll just kind of figure it out. We'll just kind of feel it out as we go. No, you have to predetermine in your life and decide in your behaviors, your thought process, the way you live, your identity. I'm setting some rocks down, and I'm not just going to go with the drift and the flow of our culture. I'm going to determine in my heart who I am. And it doesn't matter what people around me do. It doesn't matter what other Christians do. It doesn't matter how everybody else lives. I know how I'm going to live because I know that God is my judge. Call me whatever you want. And so that's what Daniel does. And what the other exiles do is not what Daniel does. You get the sense when you read through the scriptures that the other Hebrew slaves and those who've been captured are not as strong. They have not purposed in their heart to follow God. In fact, you read this in Psalm chapter 1, or Psalm 137, verse 1. It says, by the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down, yea, we wept when we remembered Zion. There on the poplars we hung our harps. For our captors, the Babylonians, asked us to sing songs. Our tormentors demanded songs of joy. And they said, sing us one of the songs of Zion. How can we sing the songs of the Lord while in a foreign land? They said. So you have those that get to Babylon and they are so crushed and their heart is so broken and they're looking around and they're going, our temple's in ruin, our wall's been knocked down, we've been dragged off to live in a place where they worship Bel and they worship Marduk, and Yahweh does not seem to have any footing in Babylon, and we can't even get ourselves to sing a song to our God while we're in Babylon. We're so heartbroken and crushed. And Daniel says, not so with me. There may be those from my youth group days back in Jerusalem who got here and they can't get themselves to sing a song to God, but I'm telling you, they can call me whatever they want. They can call me Belshazzar. I've set some rocks down. I've purposed in my heart that no matter what happens to me, God is my judge, and I'm going to follow him all the days of my life, even if the rest of my days are in Babylon. Because I set some rocks down. I know who I am. And you go, well, how does he have the confidence to do that? He's 16, 17, 18 years old. And I mean, you remember, going off to college and all of a sudden you were experiencing new things and you joined a new fraternity and, you were, hanging out with your bros back in your hometown. And then you all of a sudden were, freshman at whatever university and you were a part of the Kappa Gadea fraternity, whatever it was. And you're now, that one takes a second, but when you get it, it's kind of funny. And you're going, man, that was a struggle. And it took you years maybe to recover and get back to some rocks being set down in your life to go, I don't want to live that way. But these guys, they had this ability to, day one, say, I've already decided who I'm going to be. I've purposed in my heart. And the reason for that, you go back to the first sentence of Daniel, it says they were the king's nobles' kids. And that meant that they had grown up in the house of Josiah. Josiah, if you go back to 2 Kings 22, 23, he was one of the iconic kings of Israel. And he was one of the kings that in the days where culture was starting to shift, they were trying to figure out as the people of God, are we going to follow God or are we going to just do what we want? And Josiah was the king that reformed the law. He rebuilt the temple. He was the king who, they had watched Josiah set some rocks down. Priests that had been ungodly, Josiah was the first one to get rid of them. And they had grown up in Josiah's house. And so when they got to Babylon and they got squeezed, I don't know if they had WWJD, what would Josiah do, bracelets or how it worked, but they had seen Josiah set some rocks down. And they knew in Josiah's house that you followed the Lord. That was not a question. And it didn't matter what names you got called. It didn't matter what happened. You were going to put rocks down. And when they were squeezed, that upbringing came out of them. Maybe for you, maybe for me today as moms, as dads, as a church that's devoting ourselves more and more to the next generation of raising up on the other side of this wall young men and women that walk into their schools, walk into the hallways of colleges and say, we're going to follow our God no matter what happens in Babylon. Are your sons and daughters being raised in Josiah's house right now? And you're like, well, I don't know. We watch Netflix and we're kind of like normal people. Are they watching you set some rocks down in your own life and determining in your own heart who you're going to be? And it's not always so much what you say, it's what they're watching you do and determining, look, we may live in a culture where people do this and say this and act this way, and maybe they use those words, but we don't use those words. As for me and my house, we serve the Lord. And we've set some rocks down in this house and in this family. And when your sons and daughters watch you do that, it's powerful. It's powerful. Because it happens eventually, just like it happened for Daniel and these guys. You will get called names in Babylon. In fact, I wanted to call the sermon today, You'll Be Called Names in Babylon, but I realized that was not a great Mother's Day title. So, but the reality for you and for me, you will be called names in Babylon. You go, well, what do you mean by that? I'm not in high school. I'm not in middle school. I'm not getting shoved in lockers anymore. Nobody's calling me a name. Well, it's subversive, but you feel it. It presses against you. As you hop into the stream of culture at work or wherever, you feel it. I'll give you one example. Our culture on the surface, in the Babylon that we live in, on the surface, it looks really, really tolerant. In fact, you hear that word a lot, that you should be tolerant, and I'm not against tolerance. I think that's a fine concept, but our culture, it appears on the surface to be very, very tolerant, but you drill an inch beneath that, and our Babylon, and our culture, and our society is very intolerant, especially to you if you're a Christ follower. And you go, man, I feel that. What is that about? It's a culture and a society that says, look, have your values, that's fine. Have your morality, that's fine. But you need to know at the end of the day, here in Babylon, there are a lot of moralities. Have your truth, that's fine. But you need to know at the end of the day that you don't hold absolute truth. There's a lot of truths. Have your standards of right and wrong. Raise your kids with those standards of right and wrong. That's all fine and good. But you need to know there's a lot of versions of right and there's a lot of versions of wrong. Be careful setting rocks down, because the moment you do, people are going to go, well, that's intolerant of you. And you feel that against you all the time. And don't you dare commit the cardinal sin of trying to force any of that on anybody or even being public about it. Don't you dare try to convert anybody to that sense of absolute truth that's guided you your whole life, or talk about it in public, because if you do, and if you drill beneath it, it's incredibly intolerant, because a society that says don't force your beliefs on anybody, and to make sure that you don't, we're going to force that belief that doing that is wrong on you. And don't you dare try to convert anybody to your perspectives about God, or that that there is a God. And if you do, we're going to convert you to a belief that you doing that is wrong. And it looks like tolerance, and it's all done in the name of tolerance, but you drill an inch beneath the surface, and it's incredibly intolerant. And on the flip side of that, and you need to know this as you go throughout your life, as you go throughout your job, that as a Christian, as a Christ follower who looks up to the sky every day and says, God is my judge. I don't care what you call me. I don't care if you call me intolerant. I don't care what name you throw in my direction. God is my judge. As a Christ follower, Christianity in our society, in our Babylon, on the surface, it looks intolerant, but it is incredibly tolerant. In fact, it has gone beyond the standard of tolerance as Christ followers. We follow the guy who does not say, argue with your enemies or cut your enemies out of your life. We follow the guy who says, love your enemies and wash your enemies' feet with a towel. We follow the guy who says, hey, look, you don't crucify those who oppose you. We follow the guy who says, I was crucified for those who oppose me. And that's not the standard of tolerance. That's the standard of love that you and I bear and we carry everywhere we go in our Babylon. And it's different in Babylon. It's different when we wake up every day and we start living on our values and we start living on our faith. When the music plays in the town square and you start living a life that says, no, I put some rocks down. I don't care what you call me. I'm putting some rocks down on the shoreline of my life. They'll call you names in Babylon, but you have to know deep in your bones, like Daniel did, I know who I am. I don't care what you call me. And you keep moving through this story, and I love these guys. It says that in the very next part, Daniel then said to the guard, whom the chief had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azrael, he said, please test your servants for 10 days. Give us nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink. And so if you're looking for a Mother's Day tie-in for the sermon, there you go. Kids, eat your vegetables. Be like Daniel. Then compare our appearance with that of the young men who eat the royal food, and treat your servants in accordance with what you see. So he agreed to this, and it said he tested them for 10 days. Ashpenaz is like, okay, deal. And so what do they do here? They get to Babylon, and they say, doesn't matter what you call us, doesn't matter what you do, we're setting some rocks down, we're not eating the food. That's rock one. And you hear that on the surface, and you're like, I don't really get it, Daniel. They give you a new name, and you're not really offended, but they ask you to eat food that you've never had, and you flip your lid. What's going on? And I always heard this story, especially growing up in vacation Bible school. Well, they were trying to get those kids to drink alcohol. That's the problem. And this is a story to make sure you put your foot down and you never have any of the booze of Babylon, because that's what this is about, trying to get those teenagers to drink. And if you're a good teenager, not so with you. That's not what the story's about. The food was the food of one of the Babylonian gods, the god Nebo. And part of the Babylonian culture and a way they knew you were in on Babylon was at the feasts of Nebo. Whenever they had the table of Nebo laid out, you were going to pull up a table and you were going to eat the food. And if you were coming from Jerusalem or you were coming from one of the far reaches of the world and you got to Babylon and you saw the food on the table of Nebo, you're like, that looks way better than where I was coming from, and you would eat it. And it was something you would eat to sort of celebrate. I'm not there, I'm here. Woo! High five to Nebo. And they get there and they're like, we're not gonna, the food on the table was a source of pleasure. The wine was a source of pleasure. And they get there and they say, look, everyone else in Babylon may have a passion for promotion in the kingdom of Nebuchadnezzar. Everyone else in Babylon may have a passion for pleasure. But for us, this is what it means to purpose in your heart. We've set some rocks down, and our passion is going to be for purity over pleasure and over promotion. You want to know what it looks like to set rocks down in Babylon? You determine in your heart that no matter what, I'm not compromising on my standards of purity. I'm not compromising on what it means to be pure. And you hear that, you go, is that about sex? Well, at some level, but that's not the only way. Being a person of purity is a person who says, I will compromise on pleasure, but I won't compromise on purity. I will compromise on how I achieve satisfaction and joy, but I won't compromise on my values and my sense of purity and who I am in my soul. Where everybody else in our culture in Babylon does what? They may somewhere along the way have a few standards that they carry into adulthood, but those are squishy and undefined. And the moment they find something that gives them pleasure, once they start eating the food of Nebo in our culture, they go, all sense of purity or standards are out the window. What determines the bit in my mouth that determines my direction is whatever gives me pleasure and satisfaction. And Daniel says, not so with me. And the people of God say, not so with me. I've set some rocks down. And more important than anything, I'm going to be pure to my God. I'm going to set some rocks down and determine in my heart and purpose in my heart who I'm going to be. And you go, well, how do I start to live that way? It's when you decide in your life what standards are going to be in all aspects and different capacities and different ways in your life. You start determining, this is who I'm going to be. It's when you decide, I'm not just going to get to the party. You ever done the thing, like I'll just decide, maybe you're on a diet, and you're like, I'll just decide when I get to the restaurant what I'm going to eat. 4 cheeseburgers later, you're like, that was a bad idea. It's the same thing. You've got to determine in your heart, this is who I'm going to be. And so whether it's in terms of alcohol, you would say, you know what? This is my limit. This is who I am. I'm setting some rocks down in terms of alcohol. It could be in terms of television and what you watch. And everybody else in culture is like, whatever Netflix throws up, we're watching it. Whatever's on HBO, we just watch it. And we just kind of turn a blind eye to some of the stuff that doesn't look great. But you would say, not so with me. I've set some rocks down and I've determined I'm not going to watch that. I'm not going to say those words. I'm not going to allow that to start to wash over me constantly. Because what it will do is start to cause me to drift down the stream to a direction that I don't want to go. In terms of money, I'm going to have some standards on how I spend money and the kind of person I'm going to be. And if you don't do this, what happens in Babylon, the first moment of pain or stress hits, COVID comes into your life, and all of a sudden what happens? The bank account, the bottle are drained, and you're just binge watching Netflix trying to get through it. And all rocks are off the table, and you're just floating down the stream of Babylon. And you got to be like Daniel and say, I'm setting some standards in place of who I want to be. I've determined in my heart. And the same is true for your kids. That it's not so much you and I going, okay, well, here's, you can watch, Wheel of Fortune, but not Game of Thrones or whatever it is. It's not so, it's you and I saying, hey, look, I've set some rocks down. Mom and Dad have set some rocks down. Grandma and Grandpa have some rocks in place. Here's what they are. And you start doing that in terms of your life, and you start sharing that, and you say, hey, here's where the rocks are in our house. As for me and my house, we serve the Lord. And all of a sudden, you've got some rocks in place around alcohol. You got some rocks in place around TV, around Netflix, or whatever it is. You got some rocks in place around money. Listen, if you're not talking to your sons and daughters about sex and about money, somebody in Babylon's whispering in their ear. Somebody's determining for them what they think about sex and about money. And you've got the job, and I've got the job to the next generation to say, we're going to set the rocks down for you. And you're going to go into a world Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. You're going to go off to colleges, universities. You're going places where Babylon's going to be strong and the rivers are going to be raging. But you will know where mom and dad set the rocks down because you grew up in Josiah's house. And you start living that way. And you go, man, I want to be the kind of person that does that. But I don't really know how. What does that look like? Well, it's less what you say to your kids. It's more what you do. And it's how you start to do that in your own life. You go, well, how do I know what my standards are? Well, let me ask you a question. This is a litmus test to do regularly in your life. Are there things in your life currently that you have given permission to say, well, that's okay, not a big deal. But 5 years ago, you would have said is wrong. 5 years ago, you would have looked at your 2021 self and said, I would have never drank that much. I would have never said those words. I would have never watched that. I would have never treated people that way. But now you're like, whatever, man. And it's time in your life, if something here resonates with you, to get out of the water and go, whoa, how did I get here? I need to go back and set some rocks down. I think somewhere along the way, I put pleasure over purity. I think I put promotion over being a person of purpose. I think I allowed for something that was not of God to take up the main North Star of my heart, and I got to get back to setting some rocks down. And you do that litmus test, and it's a nice way to kind of keep yourself looking at the shoreline constantly going, whoa, how am I drifting? Am I heading in a direction in Babylon I don't want to go? Because the current will naturally pull you in a direction you don't want to go unless you pay attention. That's the constant work of the people of God. And having standards and having rocks down on the shore of life. And I love what happened next. It says this, and I believe this is true for you. I believe this is true for me when we do this in our life. It says that they tell Ashpenaz this is the deal, and they do this for 3 years. And it says at the end of the 10 days, so they're 10 days in Babylon, they looked healthier and better nourished than any of the young men who ate the royal food. And to these 4 young men, God gave knowledge and understanding. And so God blesses their decision. They found favor in the eyes of God because they said, look, Belshazzar, Daniel, God is our judge. We're going to keep our head and our mind and our affections devoted to God no matter what. And it says, at the end of the time, the king brought them into his service, and the chief official presented them to Nebuchadnezzar. And the king talked with them, and he found none equal to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they entered the king's service. And in every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king questioned them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in his whole kingdom. And it wasn't just God that they found favor with. It was ultimately Nebuchadnezzar that they found favor with. Because they decided to live their life on purpose. And I'm telling you, in our culture, in our society, if you decide to be the kind of person at work, you decide to be the person in terms of at the ball fields, or you determine in your heart, I'm going to be the kind of parent who does this, you will not just find favor in the eyes of your God. You will find favors in the eyes of the kings of this world. Because people are dying to be in the presence of somebody who lives their life on purpose and isn't just floating in the stream and the flow of culture. And when you encounter it, and when you experience somebody who woke up yesterday or woke up today and lives their life on purpose, and they're not just an ant on a log going with whatever, when you meet somebody who said, no, not so with me, I've set some rocks down in my life, you start finding favor in the eyes of other people, because our world is starving for people who have a backbone and who have convictions and have values. And I'm telling you, you start living that way and you start determining to be that kind of a person, and all of a sudden, you're going to find favor in the eyes of the people around you. You're going to find favor in the eyes of people that you work with. You're going to find favor in the eyes of, they may have said some things. They may have called you some names behind your back. But when they get in their car and they drive home, they wish they could be like you. They wish they had the ability to set some rocks down in their own life. They admire that. And you go forward, and even if that doesn't happen, you go forward and say, you know what, one way or the other, God is my judge, and I found favor in the eyes of my King. And I want to be that kind of a person. Let me ask you a question today. Do you need to set some rocks down? Are you coming out of the last 13 months and you're going, man, I don't know how that got over there. I don't know how I got over there. And maybe you got some dust on you relationally, where it's every 100 days you seem to interact with somebody and you're in a place where you're going, man, I feel like I'm in a place, I'm coming out of the water somewhere I don't want to be. You can set some rocks down in your life for how you want to treat people, how you want to be treated. Set some rocks down in your life. Maybe for you, it's some habits you picked up over the last 13 months. You go, I don't want to be this kind of person. I need to determine in my heart who I want to be and honor my God. And if you do that, I'm telling you, you will find favor in the eyes of your God. And I want that for you. I want that for me. I want that for our church. Would we be a beacon of hope, the kind of place that sets rocks down and determines who we're going to be before we get into the water, the kind of people we're going to be. Let's pray together. Jesus, I thank you that you have allowed us as your sons and your daughters to carry your name. We get the opportunity every day to walk into hallways, offices, schools, and carry your name, God, the King of Kings. And when we carry that banner well, and God, when we don't, and I know I'm at times the worst, I'm the one to shrink back, would you renew us with grace and allow us to get out of the water and set the rocks down again? And maybe for somebody within the sound of my voice today, that's where they're at. They just need to hear that it's okay and they can set the rocks down again. And as they come out of the water right now, God, I pray you give them a confidence and you give them a grace to move the rocks to where they need to be. And would they have the confidence and the strength of heart to sit down and resolve and purpose who they want to be? Would we not just be ants on a log, God? Would we be leaders? Would we be the kind of people, the kind of moms, the kind of dads who take the reins back from Babylon and dictate and determine for ourselves and our heart, for our children, who we're going to be and what kind of lives we're going to live? And will we declare over all our days, God is my judge. Where I have faltered and failed, I get back up and say, God is my judge. And I set some rocks down to remind myself of what it looks like to live a life worthy of his name in Babylon. In Jesus' name we pray, and all of God's children said, grace and peace.
Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, Jesus, Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. You're worthy of of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are, and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. You are worthy, God. You're worthy of every song we could ever sing. Worthy of all the praise we could ever bring. You're worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, Jesus. Jesus, the name above every other name. Yes, you are. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. You're worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. And holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are, and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. I will build my life, and I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation, and I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken, and I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation, and I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. And holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are, and fill me with your heart and